And of course, you have those iconic moments, and the war goes on. Fast forward a little bit. This is a quote from your dad. Then the nightly routine commenced. The password, star shells, artillery whistling over, Japanese raids and infiltrators, bursts of small arms fire, corpsmen at the bang of grenades, calls for mortar flares, and HE on the company front, heavy artillery fire on and on and on until dawn. Again, you read these books, or you watch, when you watch the Pacific, there's 12 straight minutes, and I'm making this number up, but there's 12 straight minutes or 9 straight minutes of machine guns and chaos. And sitting on my couch in my air-conditioned house, I'm getting unnerved after 12 minutes. Now imagine it's not 12 minutes, it's not 12 hours, it's not 12 days. It is weeks and weeks and weeks of this. Continuing on with the book, this was the third night on the island, and certain realities of the infantryman's life were becoming painfully obvious. My father expressed it to me about as eloquently as he could. One of the things that a frontline infantryman faced was filth. Filth and fear went right together. By the third day, either you or your foxhole buddy told each other that he stunk, and of course, you both stank from the terrible heat, the sweat. Absolutely no way to get yourself cleaned up. So that's what they're doing, and it's just day after day after day. Isn't it strange? Like I'll train jujitsu or something. I need to take a shower within 15 minutes. I'm just a spoiled, pathetic human, and I train jujitsu, and I gotta take a shower. I work out in the morning. I gotta take a shower. And here are these guys in the mud, filth, piss, shit, just blood and guts, and they're just day after day after day after day. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. There's more fighting. There's more details. At the end, this is your dad. At the end of the first week, our entire division had suffered nearly 4,000 casualties. About 1,000 more than the 2nd Marine Division lost in Tarawa. During this time, 1st Marine Regiment had lost 1,672 men, or 56% of that regiment's strength. The division's heavy losses troubled the 3rd Amphibious Corps commander. On September 21st, General Roy Geiger visited the CP of the 1st Marines to get a clearer picture of the situation. He concluded the 1st Marines were finished, and said that the regiment should be relieved and replaced by an Army regiment. General Geiger was not inclined to impose his will on General Rupertus, but he finally felt it necessary. He realized the 1st Marines were shot to pieces, and the 5th and 7th Marines, who had suffered heavily, would need help. Brutal.
Let me just inject really quick. So General Geiger, the 1st Marine aviator, I believe. Am I right, Dave?
Correct. There's airfields named after him, like Geiger Field.
Yes.
He's a historically prominent guy.
And he didn't want to say, hey, you got to take some help, but eventually he's like, you're going to need some help.
Yeah, that's that whole dynamic is, the Army, and I actually wrote an article for a World War II magazine that it was fall 2022 issue, where I spoke about Marine and Army inter-service cooperation. Because my father, obviously fiercely proud to be a Marine, very Marine-centric in his philosophy and views of everything, and sense of esprit de corps. But I thought he did a really good job with the old breed of stepping away from that, stepping back from that, and saying, okay, a situation like Peleliu, we needed all the help we could have. At that point, you need all of your assets when you're facing an existential threat that is grinding your people down. It's not about, well, Marines are tougher than soldiers, let the Marines get it done. I don't want to go too far into the whole General Rupertus question. I think the Marines who were there, my father being one of them, had some pretty definite ideas on his lack of willingness to bring in the 81st
Well,
Division.
Dave and I we got to see firsthand all the inter-service rivalry just disappear because the Battle of Ramadi, the enemy didn't care if you were wearing a Marine Corps uniform, an Army uniform, a Navy uniform. They were trying to kill you, and we needed to work together to kill them first.
Right.
And just a really powerful unifying factor that comes into play when things get bad enough.
Sure.
So, fast forward a little bit. The date was September 25th, D+10. Although the 1st Marines were now out of the fight, 20 more grueling days would pass before the 5th Marines were relieved. They would be just as depleted from their time in the ridges. When they board, and again, I'm saying some things right now that if you, it's like, oh, what am I talking about, ridges? Get the book so you understand what that is. When they boarded the trucks, they headed south along the east road, then northward toward the west road. As they drove past the airfield, they were amazed at the terrain's transition from a combat zone to an American air base. Clean-shaven rear echelon personnel eyed filthy, bearded, and bedraggled infantrymen curiously as they drove by on the trucks. My father described it as being animals observed in a circus parade. Fast forward a little bit. As my father and his fellow Marines passed through the Army lines, they could hear the chatter of Japanese machine guns and see bluish-white tracers passing high above them. The men up on the ridge were pinned down. The witty, likable, and this is your dad, quote, the witty, likable sergeant, and this is Teskovich, with whom I had the memorable conversation the night he and Hillbilly came over to my foxhole, was killed on September 25th while riding on a tank directing his fire. He was shot in the abdomen. What a waste. We all greatly regretted his death. Fast forward a little bit. While Snafu and I were this is your dad, quote, while Snafu and I were getting the mortar set up, I could hear something behind me in the pillbox. It was Japs in there, and I could hear them talking to each other in excited voices, but not very loud. I heard metal rattle against the grating in one of the vision ports on the side of the bunker. They were trying to get a rifle barrel through there. I grabbed my carbine and yelled to Bergen, "There's nips in that pillbox." End quote. And this is obviously a famous scene in the Pacific. Bergen at first didn't believe what my father had said. "Sledgehammer, you're cracking up." Fortunately for all concerned, however, he took him seriously and moved over to the ventilator port directly behind my father. It was a small square opening about 6 by 8 inches, covered with iron bars about a half an inch apart. There was a Japanese soldier right there, and Bergen shot him point blank with his carbine. This caused a stir among the other Japanese inside the structure. My father told me, quote, we were all on alert when the shooting started. A Jap threw a grenade out the entrance to my left, and I yelled grenade and dove for cover behind the sand breastwork that protected the entrance. It was L-shaped to protect entrance from our fire. The Japs tossed out a few more grenades, but they exploded and none of us got hit. They were all hugging the deck. I remember most of the guys crawled around to the front and were staying low so the Japs inside couldn't see them or shoot at them. John Redifer and Vincent Santos jumped on top. Bergen yelled to me, "Look over that wall and see what's in there, Sledgehammer." My father was closest to the entrance at the end of the bunker. As he said to me, quote, I was trained to follow orders without question, so I looked over that wall down into the bunker. It almost cost him his life. No more than 5 or 6 feet away was a Japanese machine gunner crouched over his weapon. Quote, I was staring right into the muzzle of his machine gun. As soon as I saw that, I jerked my head down so fast my helmet almost flew off because my chin strap wasn't buckled. As I did, he fired a quick burst from his machine gun. The rounds went right over my head through the sand that was piled up to that protective wall by the door, end quote. In July 2006, I flew to Texas and visited Bergen. He showed me around Lancaster in his red pickup truck. He reminisced about the war, including the action at the bunker. Quote, I told Sledgehammer to look over that wall. The man only had 13 days of combat experience. I should have looked myself. The Jap machine gunner fired a burst and almost took his head off. He ducked. Thank God. Do you remember him saying anything, I asked? Yeah, I heard him say in a kind of hoarse voice, I'm okay. I'm all right.